Hello everyone, this is Dale with Attractive Realty, real estate broker. Today we're talking about what is seller paid closing cost. It is one of the most confusing things that I come across with buyers and sellers. Typically in the industry there is fees that need to be paid at closing. Title fees, mortgage tax, basically not commissions, that's factored in different. Basically fees from the mortgage company that they charge, buy down, stuff like that. So you have all these fees that the buyer is going to take on, and usually typically it's in a pretty decent amount besides their down payment. With seller paid closing costs, the seller is paying these fees, so it affects their net amount, which is what they would get back at closing. So if you just use $1, if you're selling the house for $1, they would have closing costs of 5 cents, and the seller is only getting 95 cents, and the 5 cents is going to pay these fees at closing. It really should be termed buyer financing closing costs, but since the seller is paying it for the buyer, it's their way of financing into their mortgage, if that makes sense. I know it's still kind of confusing. So basically, when you're looking to sell your home, typically right now 3% is the average. I've seen 3.5%. I've seen all the way up to 5% before. That is going to affect what you get back. Now, do you have to include it? There's no rule. People typically put it in there at 3%, but that could push you out of a search criteria that the buyer wants to look. And you have to keep open-minded that the buyer may be cash, maybe 100% cash, maybe 20% cash, and they could switch to less cash to pay for their closing costs in cash, and your net effect would be more rather than less. So if you had a cash buyer and they could pay their closing costs, you don't need to include the seller paid closing cost, if that makes sense. Keep on track with me here, see if you can. So basically, when selling your house, typically people will account for 3% seller paid closing costs that the buyer is going to ask for, which is then going to affect your net amount, which is what you receive after closing. So you can either put it in there, or if you're in a tough spot, you just got to remove it and work with what the buyer has when the offer comes in. Because you don't know if they can borrow more funds, you don't know if they have more cash, you don't know if you can also bump up the sales price above the list price to cover these closing costs that the buyer needs to pay for. So those are your options with seller paid closing costs. If you have more questions on this, my cell phone number is listed below, or my email address. Call me anytime, and we can discuss it. Thanks, and until next time.